Alright, hello there! So today I'm going to be talking about writing books and going through my sort of medium of the road ones, my least favorite, and then the two that I swear by and love. So the first couple are my medium ones. So the first one is actually, it fell over, that was gonna happen. The first one is called 642 Things to Write About, and I remember when, it's not really a writing craft book so much as it's ideas, like a 4-year-old child is afraid of the dark. Write about the child's fears and what you might say or do to help the child overcome the fears. Write wedding vows. The bride is 35 years old. It's her first marriage. The groom is 48 and it's his third go-round at the altar. So I have a whole bunch of pages dog-eared in here of just concepts that I thought were interesting. I have not written a word in this book, but actually I find it really helpful for just inspiration when I can't think of anything. And the short story, the 5 series of internet-connected short stories that I wrote at Christmas time were inspired by a prompt that I got from this book, and I ended up changing it around a lot. An estranged mother and son who haven't seen or spoken to each other in more than 20 years meet in line at the post office in December, arms full of packages to be mailed. What do they say to each other? So that's the prompt that I wrote mine off. I ended up changing it a lot. It wasn't a mother and son, it was a brother and sister, and they weren't really at a post office, they're at a Shoppers Drug Mart, for you Canadians who know who that is, what that is. But yeah, I find it super helpful for getting inspiration. So that's number 1. Oh, we're gonna have some problems here with this freaking falling over. Okay. This is number 2. That is sort of a medium, so crafting novels and short stories. It's put out by Writer's Digest, which I used to really follow like super religiously, their website. Basically it's a compilation. All the chapters are essays written by different authors, and it's separated into a whole bunch of different parts. So part 1 is characters, and then you have plot and conflict, point of view, setting and backstory. I really liked some of them. I found some of them super helpful, and then others I was just like, eh. But it was worth a shot to read, and there's some valuable stuff in here. I've dog-eared a couple pages. I dog-eared this one because it says, write an international love story. Write a fragment of fiction about high school sweethearts who live in towns very close to each other but separated by the US-Canada border. And I was like, that's cool. Like, I would like to write that, given as someone who's I have both citizenships, and I've, like, especially this past year, been back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. That would be really fun to write. So it's not all prompts though, it's more advice, and some of them are super helpful. Okay, the next one is we're just gonna leave it, okay? The next one is Dialogue by Gloria Kempton. This book is in really bad shape. I think I got it used. I'm gonna say I did. I bought this because I used to take, I think there was the Write Great Fiction for Characters out of the library all the time, and I loved it so much. I don't know why I never bought it. I should buy it because it was a really, really great book. I loved that one. And then I saw this one for sale, I think for like a discount, and I was like, sure, I'll get that. I didn't like it nearly as much as I liked the character one, but there's some things in here that really stuck with me. She has lots of exercises, which honestly I don't do as much as I probably should when I'm doing writing books. Some of the stuff she says about dialogue is pretty, I mean, in my like elementary, it's pretty basic. It's very helpful for an introduction, and I don't think it talks about I think it spends too much time on certain things and not enough time on other things. Like, she has a whole section, I think, on like the uhs, ands, and ers, some how-tos and dialogue quirks. So then she has a whole bunch of characters, like the twisted tongue, someone who is stuttering a lot, the rocket, someone who's off like a shot, the turtle, someone who's slow. And I guess these are fun quirks, I guess, but I don't think that writing a character who like talks really slow is necessarily the best form of characterization, if you know what I mean, or like what the purpose is in that, if that makes sense. The chapter that really stuck with me is her It's called It Was a Dark and Stormy Night, Using Dialogue to Set the Mood and Facilitate the Emotion. I also think she has a bit of dialogue in here from Jurassic Park that she calls like breathless dialogue, and that passage is also stuck with me really well. So there's really great examples, and there's some good stuff in that one. Okay, everything's a disaster. The next one, that's a middle of the road, is Characters and Viewpoint, which I actually am thinking I might reread because I'm having a little bit of trouble with my characters, and I'm not sure that I know what I'm doing with my viewpoint. I have a very set idea. It's like third person, but close third person in free and direct style, but I'm switching each chapter between which character we're close to. So in one chapter we're close to one sister, Greer, and the other chapter we're close to the other sister, Aggie. So even though it's in third person, it's supposed to be very clear who's in whose thoughts, and I just want to make sure that I'm doing that right. But this one was, you know, it's a fun, easy read. I love reading about characters. Now for the ones that I actually did not finish. So the first one is, these are both very controversial too. So the first one is Save the Cat Goes to the Movies. So I know that Save the Cat is pretty big on AuthorTube, as far as I can tell. A lot of people seem to use it. I am fully aware now that there is a book called Save the Cat Writes a Novel. There is also a book called Save the Cat. Save the Cat Goes to the Movies takes the 10 genres, and here, I'll read it. Insights into 10 of the most popular genres Hollywood and audiences love. Beat for beat breakdowns of 50 landmark movies of the past 30 years. And references to 500 movie cousins to guide you in the writing of your script. So they basically go through their beat sheet and do it for, I guess, 50 different movies. And it's interesting. I don't think I didn't not finish this one, but I only read the genres that were relevant to me. And I honestly don't remember anything about what I read in this one. I felt that maybe Save the Cat Writes a Novel is a lot better and more relevant for me, but I felt that the other two books I'm going to show later did a lot better job with the whole beat and plotting thing than this one did. And I'm not super jazzed to go and buy another Save the Cat book just because I don't like their system as much, and their genres confuse me a lot. So the next one that I don't like, sorry, I know I did not finish. I got about, how many pages through? I got about 183 pages through On Writing by Stephen King, and then I did not finish it. I know that this is a much beloved book. The reason I did not finish it was because I found it quite discouraging. There's a part in it, I think, where he basically says, you're either a good writer or you're not, and that's it. Like, I found it, I might be misremembering this and exaggerating it more than it is, but I did find it a little bit discouraging as someone who is trying to see, like, how can I improve my writing? How can I become published? Or eventually, how can I edit better? To get a very firm, like, you have it or you do not in this book. And that's not to say I think that I don't have it, because judiciously, I suppose, when I read a piece of my writing, I know that it's not total crap. Some of it is, but then sometimes I'm like, hey, that's okay. That's acceptable, I think. And then when you give it to other people, they'll be like, oh, I really felt that. Or they'll say, this is beautiful. Or they'll say, look at this prose. Or I had someone on Scribophile go through an opening scene of the novel that I'm working on now. I just put it there just to get feedback because I was feeling really discouraged about the story. And they gave me this, like, line by line, like, analysis of what I'd done right. They were like, and in this line of dialogue, you demonstrated these character traits, but also put in the setting. And I was like, oh, you're just showering me in praise today. This is exactly what I needed. So yeah. Anyways, I found that some of the undertones of it I wasn't crazy about, but this is one that I want to not pick up from where I left off, probably start over, because I don't remember. I read it a while ago, and start again. The other thing is that I've never actually read any Stephen King before. I am a scaredy cat, and I don't go to the movies. I hide my head because I'm a scaredy cat, so his books scare me and I don't want to try them. Okay, and now for the fun part, which are the best writing books I have ever read, and the ones that I stick in my head all the time and that I reference for my own writing. The first one is John Truby's The Anatomy of Story. Now this was also written about screenwriting, about movies, but I think that in some cases screenwriters are more sort of not formulaic, but analytical in their writing of scripts than some of the novel writing books that I've read can be. Okay, continuing on with The Anatomy of Story. Why I love this book so much. He starts with, everyone can tell a story. We do it every day. So I love how encouraging it is, and I love how it really gives you a lot of freedom. Its thought is, what is this thing with this 3-act structure? Basically is his thought. Like, what if you need 4 acts? What if you need 5? Why do you have to have 3? He also goes through his beats aren't so much beats as they're like character things. So problem, psychological need, moral need, desire, opponent, plan, battle, psychological revelation, and new equilibrium. Those are the steps that I feel like every story goes through. There's a problem, or you see the character at normal, and they have a flaw, and then you see a problem come up and there's sort of a new world. And then he goes through and expands on that and talks about how you can weave theme into your story through like the world and through the characters. And his whole thing is that your story should be based around a theme, and everything should connect to that theme, that idea that you want people to take home with them. And he has amazing examples from like really great movies such as It's a Wonderful Life, which I watched for the first time actually this Christmas after having basically heard a lot about it in this book. I could see it so easily how they did what is described here. Not consciously, I'm going to follow John Truby's Anatomy of Story, because obviously that was way before this was written, but just you could see how the principles worked so well, and then the catharsis at the end where there's the final scene, and it's so joyful, and it's just this overwhelming feeling of like happiness and triumph. I was crying. So it tries to show you how you can write a book that gives that catharsis, that emotional moment, and tries to explore like how we connect with books that way. He also does an amazing job at sort of breaking things down. He breaks down Pride and Prejudice. He breaks down an episode of MASH, I want to say, into the steps that he talks about in like really big detail, and I love reading that. I love seeing books breaking down, which is what I'm trying to do with my Reading Like a Writer series. Okay, and then the last one that I really, really love is called The Story Grid by Shawn. I actually don't have the physical copy of this book because I have the ebook on my phone. I really should buy it actually because it's an amazing book. It's a story grid, so I'm just going to start with the one con I have with it, which is that they tend to say things as, you absolutely must do this. And I get the intention sometimes that it's like, you must do this or it's not going to work. So as long as you just take that language as like this is the methodology that they're suggesting, and to be in the methodology you must do this, but you don't have to follow the methodology exactly to have a great story. Obviously they do a lot of analysis. The elements that they talk about are there in all of these great stories, but I assume that when they break stuff down, sometimes they're like every story, chapter, sequence, scene, beat should have a whole bunch of elements to it, and they like analyze it so much, and it would just explode my mind to think of it that much. So there's a certain part of their analysis that I say, okay, I'm not gonna deal with that right now. I'm gonna assume that I'm doing it kind of subconsciously and think of it in editing. It's a lot. There's a lot of information. I'm linking the website down below too, because their website has a ton of articles and resources. But what I really love about the story grid is how they break down genre. It's not genre that you'd see like in a bookstore, and you couldn't write to a publisher and be like, these are my genres that I'm writing right now. It's not that. it's different, but it makes more sense when you're trying to write it, I think. And then they do a really great job of talking about conventions and obligatory scenes and what needs to happen in the genre. It's not a formula at all. It's not a formula. I also love their 5 commandments and their story grid foolscap, which is kind of a way to outline a book. The 5 commandments are that you have to have an inciting incident, progressive complications, crisis, climax, and resolution, and that's the major method that I have been using to outline my stories for what I have been drafting recently. I especially have had really good success with it for short stories. The story grid, I think, is the one book that has really transformed my writing, and I think I went from like, oh, la-di-da, like, you know, what I wrote as a teenager, blah, 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 fun, 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 to a level up where I feel I know a whole lot more, and my writing has just gotten a step better, and that step, the latter, was provided by Story Grid. They don't talk so much about characters in the methodology. They're sort of supposed to come from it, which is very different from John Truby, because he is very character focused, whereas the Story Grid is very kind of plot focused, and so I find that thinking of both of them together is super helpful. Hey there, Editing Nicole here. Different bookshelf. So I just wanted to make a comment. So the 2 favorite books that I talked about, The Story Grid and John Truby's Anatomy of Story, I actually haven't read John Truby's Anatomy of Story in a while. Not since I read The Story Grid anyways, and I decided after I did that video to go back and start rereading it. And I realized something really funny, which is that those 2 books are completely contradictory. In the Story Grid, Shawn Coyne says, you know, you have to define your genre very well. You have to have, you know, 3 acts. You have to hit inciting incident, progressive complications, crisis, climax, resolution. In the foreword to John Truby's Anatomy of Story, he says, that stuff is awful. Do not use 3-act structure. Do not, like, go through and do genre beats. He would probably want to shred up to save the cat. And he says, no, 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 that's mechanical. That's the wrong way to do it. And the funny thing about that is I still like both of them a lot, and I still use both of them, even though they are completely contradictory. So if you are using them, or if you've, you know, used Story Grid or used something like Save the Cat, I would actually really encourage you to read something like Anatomy of Story, just to get a different perspective on it. Not that you have to change what you're doing, not that doing any of these methods is wrong, despite what they say in the forewords of these books. They just have to say that because they're trying to promote their methodology, right? I think that it's so useful to get those different perspectives. So yeah, that's just something that I thought would be what might be valuable for people to know, that they're super contradictory. And I love Anatomy of Story. It's a really good book, and I love what they do with it. And Anatomy of Story is really good at taking you from an idea to a concept and to characters and to a setting and to developing it. And I think Story Grid is really good for doing like a basic outline and then editing. So I think that I'm going to, for my next project, I just decided that I'm going to do, because I just have the idea, so I'm going to use Anatomy of Story to get it from an idea to something that I feel like I can outline and draft, and then I'm going to kind of tag team both of these to get it to a point where I can start writing, and then, you know, editing is a whole other ball of wax. But yeah, so very contradictory, very cool, and I encourage you to seek out perspectives that are opposite or different from what you've already been reading about story, because it can be super, super enlightening. All right, back to the video. So those are my favorite writing books. I would love to hear what yours are, if you've read any of these and what you think of them, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. And yeah, thank you so much for watching.